All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Canadian Bitcoin Conference podcast. We're here today with our trusted friends, Sonny and Ben. No Wasim today. Today we have Nico Lagan from Montreal. How are you, Nico?
Good, you guys?
Good, good. So, Nico, just to give everybody an introduction to yourself. So, there's a Bitcoin podcast. Maybe there's some Bitcoiners out there who may be interested in privacy and freedom of speech. Give us a bit of background on yourself.
I'm a former telecom sales engineer that got fired, lost his career over COVID, not taking the vaccine. I've been creating content ever since, and especially since Carney became prime minister and started pushing policies that are going after Canadians' free speech and turning Canada into surveillance, I've been putting my technical background to the help of Canadian explaining what those bills actually are about, because most people don't read bills. They don't spend hours like I do reading 100, 150, 200 pages long pieces of legislation, and they don't understand the technology that's being implemented in order to enforce those bills. And this is what I do. Literally all my content now is around AI, surveillance, censorship, and government policies.
Perfect. So, when we were talking about the introduction to this, I guess you're talking about connecting the dots between C8, C9, C220, C34, and AI for all. So all those bills. Connect the dots there for any of the Bitcoiners out there who might be interested.
That's quite a conversation right there, but I'll keep it super simple. The fact is that the Liberal government is passing bills that seems like independent bills, but they're literally passing one big bills and they split it into different portions so that we wouldn't catch up to what they're doing. So as you mentioned, you have Bill C8, C9, C22, C34, and a program by the name of AI for all that all Canadians should be aware of. Bill C9 being probably the most popular one that everybody's heard about, the Combating Hate Crime Act that just became law on July 18th, so 11 days ago. Basically, it defines what you can and cannot say both online and in the real world. It has criminalized emotions, that is hatred. So we are no longer allowed to be hateful, yet the conversation, the actual definition of hate is something more than disdain. So basically an emotion. And the reason why it's important, Bill C9 is so dangerous for free speech, is you are putting a limitation on what can and cannot be said. And the government is responsible for deciding what an emotion is. What is an emotion greater than disdain? The government gets to choose. You have Bill C22 that was just rushed through Parliament before they went on summer break. A lot of people have heard about this, and I would imagine that the Bitcoin community has, because it was all about, they call it lawful access, but it's all about your information online. A lot of VPN companies like NordVPN came out and said that they would literally leave Canada if that piece of legislation became law, because it would open backdoors into their infrastructure. Signal Message, the application that a lot of people use, even the government use to exchange private messages, also said the same thing, because the government is looking to obtain metadata. I'm sure most people know what metadata is, but simply put, it's your transmission information. Everything, every piece of information that you exchange on the internet, they want to know where it came from, who sent it, where did it go, and who received it. Yes, this is technically information that is unencrypted right now. That's something that you can intercept if you understand networking. Routers need that information in order to route your traffic to the proper person. But the government is asking for metadata while not defining what metadata means. In the bill, metadata is mentioned once with no definition. And I've had some of the biggest constitutional lawyer on my show to discuss this. And as you probably know, when a word is not defined, it can be turned into meaning whatever they want. So right now, it might be transmission data. 6 months from now, it could be the payload. It could be what was the message, what was the communication itself, not just the envelope that is transmission data. Then you have Bill C-34 that probably people have heard about. I would imagine that most have heard about it, which is the social media ban that our government wants to put in place for anybody under the age of 16. What most people don't understand is, yes, it sounds great on paper because God knows how dangerous social media can be. But the part that they're not telling you is that they will need to implement age verification methods, which will force every single Canadian out there to prove their age, similar to buying alcohol or cigarettes. You have to prove that you are over 18 or 19, depending on the province in which you live, in order for people under the age of 18 to be able to buy those products. The same thing is true with social media. And just as an asterisk, they're not using social media platform. They're using a new term called social media services, which means any website or application that has a type of forum or communication where people can interact, which is in today's world is everything. Is basically every service that's online now has a way for users to interact with each other. And then you have Bill C-8, which is the implementation, the infrastructure of the servers, the networks that will be needed in order to implement what we're talking about right now. But the part worth mentioning, because the bill is extremely technical. If you come from my background, I read it and I understand what they're asking for, like gaining access to people, to private data centers in order to inspect what they're doing, which I come from that world and that's a no-no. There's no way in hell the companies I worked for would allow the government to just show up to their data centers where they have their private network and the ones of their customers to see what's going on. That would never happen. But the big problem with Bill C-8 is that it gives the power to the Minister of Industry, which is Mélanie Joly, to remove anyone from the internet they see as a threat to the telecommunication network of Canada by forcing core providers, as they call them, internet service providers like the Bell, the Rogers, the Telus of this world, from selling me, for example, services because they see me as a threat. So they would prevent companies from selling me internet services and prohibit others from gaining me as a customer. So when you look at them separately, you don't really understand what I'm talking about because they all seem disconnected. And that's the whole point. Nobody else in Canada seems to be connecting the dots the way I am because people don't read bills and they don't have my background. But very simple way to put them together. Bill C-9 defines what you can and cannot say. What is the definition of hatred? Defined by them, could be turned into anything since it's an emotion. Bill C-22 puts in place a way where our government can track the conversations that you have online by requesting metadata from internet service providers and electronic service providers, as they call them, which is basically any service or products that's online. Bill C-34 attaches a digital ID to every Canadian because we would have to show what our social media accounts are on all social media platforms or social media service. And then you have Bill C-8 that gives the power to a government entity to decide who's a threat to the Canadian network and removing our access. So I say something wrong against the government, whatever that might be. They consider it to be hateful. With Bill C-22, they can go back for a year and see all the posts that I've done that could be considered to be hateful. Under Bill C-34, they know all of my social media service account, so they can find me everywhere. So they can track me, they can look at my conversations, they can decide what's applicable or not. And then if they choose to, they can remove my internet access. So Bill C-9 can put a criminal offense up to 2 years because I said something that was hateful. And Bill C-8 can remove my access while I'm in court, so I don't get to speak about my court case. So when you start looking at, it sounds dystopian, but we do live under a government that is extremely dystopian. And the only part I would add to this is a program that most people have never heard about that is called AI for All, that was launched by Mark Carney a few months back, that is worth an estimated of $200 billion, where our government will subsidize third-party companies to develop Canadian AI that is representative of Canadian values. So basically, they're trying to turn AI in Canada into what news became with CBC. And they stipulate in the program definition that their biggest customer will be the government. Why would the government require AI to be subsidized by us? By us, I mean taxpayers' money. Because in order to implement the infrastructure required to enforce Bill C-9, Bill C-8, Bill C-22, Bill C-34, AI is needed to do that, because we're talking about such an immense amount of data that no human being can actually analyze, make sense of it, and connect that data together. So AI is required to do so. And you don't have to go far to look at companies like Flock Safety that produces Flock cameras, the Palantir of this world, that's all they do. They have government contracts where they make sense of their big data. So hopefully that, I think I went on a spill.
Yeah, that's okay.
Hopefully that makes sense. Somewhat makes sense.
That's a great overview. I have a quick question before Ben or Sonny jump in, but I mean, obviously I haven't looked into all the bills as much as yourself and understood them, but you know, when I look through the notes, you know, yeah, it seems like it covers a lot. The one correlation or pattern I'm seeing is that Canada has started to implement these bills, you know, most recently. The UK started to implement those bills maybe about 3 or 4 months ago, or not, I think it was end of last year. And Australia, I think, were one of the first ones to implement one of the bills for digital safety around teens and internet. So they were the first. What's the connection between the Commonwealth countries and the implementation of these bills and the similarities in the bills? Like, that's really the weird thing that I don't understand fully. And I know there's a connection. Maybe you can join the dots for me.
The worst part is that it has nothing to do with the Commonwealth country, because even the US is talking about it. If you look right now, when it comes to, because you're referring to the social media ban for teenagers under the age of 16, Australia being the first country to do it outside of China, but China pretty much censors everything. So the real first country was Australia, but it's going on all over the world. Like even the US, you have states like Florida and Texas right now that are talking about implementing social media bans. And funny enough, they're pushing it to a very conservative audience, because I spent a lot of time in Texas. It's very conservative compared to Canada, but it's all about protecting the children, right? That is always, every single time a government tells you we need to take your freedoms away to protect you, you know there's a problem. Because it is not, at the end of the day, I'm a parent. I don't need a government to tell me what my son should and should not do. That's my responsibility as a parent to understand the technology. If social media is dangerous, my responsibility. But the point is that, unfortunately, it's not just the UK, France, Australia, Canada, like Commonwealth country. It is also going throughout the West as a whole. If you look, there's more countries pushing that agenda, that there are countries not pushing it. And one thing that should raise an alarm to everybody out there is it doesn't matter if the country is left-leaning, right-leaning, they're all pushing the same legislation, and somehow both sides of the aisle are in agreement. That also is a problem. When's the last time you saw bills throughout the world that both the left, the so-called left and so-called right, agree on? Never in my lifetime. You know there's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben or Sonny?
I got one. I've been, yeah, if you don't mind. How do you see Bill C-22 affecting Bitcoin users in Canada in practical terms?
That's a good question. I haven't heard anything from Bitcoin. They haven't mentioned anything about this bill, but I would be very curious how it would impact them, because it probably wouldn't impact them right now as Bill C-22 stands, because transmission data, what they call metadata, is just the transmission data, and that's clear information. Like, you need that information in order for your traffic to transit through anyone's network in order to find its destination. So that's not a big deal at the end of the day, because it exists, it's available. I could find transmission data of people by just snooping on them, but it's not that hard to get that information. The problem is that it is not defined. The metadata definition is not included in the bill, meaning that 6 months from now, 1 year from now, that could become the payload. That could become not only where is the traffic originating from, but where is it going, but what was the traffic? I need to see what's inside that envelope, if you will, because that's the best example I can use for the non-techie person out there. If you have an envelope, the sender name, sender address, receiver name, receiver address is the equivalent of typical metadata as it is defined today. But the data that's inside the envelope is sealed and you don't get to see it. You don't get to see the message. Would that change the narrative for crypto as a whole if Bill C-22 changed the definition of metadata to be the payload itself, to be what's inside? I'd be very, very curious to know if Bitcoin would have a problem with that, because that could require their traffic to be unencrypted, which that would be very problematic. So I'd be very curious. I'd be curious. It's a good point. I'd love to find an expert on the technical side of Bitcoin to see if there's a problem with it. But if VPN companies are having an issue with it, saying that it opens the door to massive privacy issues where they would have to provide personal information of their customers to the government, I would imagine that something must be applicable very similarly when it comes to Bitcoin or crypto.
In fact, Nico, I was going to... Oh, sorry. Dan, you want to go ahead?
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask you about VPN. So if VPN and messaging companies actually leave Canada, like what breaks first for everyday users?
Well, I think that everyday users don't even use VPNs. So I don't even think the average Canadian knows what a VPN is or heard the term, but they don't necessarily use it. All it means is whatever VPN company stays in Canada are giving your information to the government. So if you use VPN right now, it seems that NordVPN, which is a massive VPN in the world, is refusing to share metadata, to even share their logs for the metadata for their users, which is a great thing. But if they leave Canada, obviously the companies that are here don't care about your privacy. So what's the use of a VPN if your private information is available for the taking?
Thanks. And Dan, one last question before I turn it over here. You know, what part of this bill worries you most? Is it like the privacy, speech, or enforcement power?
Metadata. I do not like... You have the most important word in that bill is metadata. That is the information that they're trying to get from electronic service providers, core providers. They keep on interchanging that term whenever they try to explain the bill. but every single time a word is not defined, it can change to mean whatever they want. And that's a problem. And it's not even hidden. They came on publicly to say that the reason that is the case is because they want to be able to update the meaning as technology advances. But that is not how laws are supposed to be written. This is not how policies are supposed to be written. To put it into perspective for the people that are a bit older, you know, we always heard through movies a phone tap. You would have a police force that would want to listen in on the call of a specific individual because they had proof, or they were looking for proof. They had reasonable doubt that that person was committing a crime. So they would go to the court, they would get a warrant or a court order in order to listen in to that call, to be able to tap that phone in order to listen to the calls. But they wouldn't be listening to every single call in the neighborhood. They would have a mandate that would be specific for that person. Bill C-22 is literally requesting core providers and electronic service providers to potentially provide metadata for all users in Canada. So the government would literally have the legal power to spy on us throughout Canada, not specifically one single person, and that without a warrant. And what bothers me is that I come from the telecommunication world. I started my career as somebody that picked up the phone in a knock in a network operating center, just like you see on TV, where you sit in a room and there's like 20 screens on the on one of the walls, and you're monitoring everything that's going on. We would have visits from the police, the RCMP, every now and then to request information from very specific users. It was a secret thing. Our team lead would go to a different room in order to address it, but those people would have, those police forces would have a court order. They would have a warrant. They would have something to prove that they need that information. Bill C-22 is literally allowing the government to spy on everybody in Canada in the name of safety, in the name of protecting children. That is always the idea that they're pushing. So we need to spy on every single Canadian to make sure that we can catch the criminals, yet they already have the laws in their favor in order to get that information if they want to. If they respect the proper channels, telecommunication companies will share that information. Now they're looking for it. They're looking to have it without asking us first. Just have it all the time, saved up to 1 year.
Do you see, and I think I heard of communication companies or companies in general leaving Canada with the implementation of these bills. Is that a trend that's going to continue, or what's your thoughts on that?
No, I still have some friends that are in the business, like they're still in it. They've continued working after I was fired, but their main concern is not necessarily it's not a philosophical question. It's not a moral question for them. It's a money question. In order to save all of that metadata, in order to capture and save all of that metadata, you need very high-end, expensive equipment in order to do so. And this needs to be installed in their network. So they need to have the force, they need to have the money, they need to have the equipment, they need to support it. So there is a massive cost attached to it. Although Bill C-22 does refer to a way to get that money back, it's stipulated very vaguely, so it's not very precise. But I can tell you from having had conversation with upper management of some people that I know that will remain anonymous, their main concern is the cost, to a point where I've been told that they are looking at what is the cost of the penalty of not respecting those new policies compared to the cost of implementation. If it is cheaper for them not to comply, that's what they're going to do. It's really a money thing at this point for them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure on a global scale, it impacts Canadian companies from being competitive when you have, impacts like that you need to comply with?
It's more than that, though, because there's some people that actually, most telecommunication companies are too big to fail, right? They're never going to fail because that's all. We only have about 3, right? Like our 3 main companies being TELUS, Rogers, and Bell. They're not going to fail. And the CRTC will never allow them to buy each other out either. So they're going to continue telling us that there's competition, but we are still one of the countries that pay the most for our telecommunication services. We are extremely expensive compared to the US, compared to Europe. It doesn't even compare. You're from Europe, you know that. So the costs here are astronomical, very expensive in Canada. But at the end of the day, the government, I wouldn't be surprised, because if you read Bill C-22, they will subsidize that to an extent. It's vague. It's not clearly defined like most of the bills that they're pushing right now, but there seemed to be an avenue for them to get compensated for.
Ben, you want to jump in?
Yeah, well, your previous point, you kind of landed on, it all came down to money, and that's kind of why we're here. We're the Bitcoiners. We're always thinking about money. And your story about when you came, or how you kind of came to this calling, this what you do now during the COVID era or years, that's kind of what got me down my Bitcoin rabbit hole. Bringing us all back to what we were dealing with at the time, but when they froze bank accounts, when they did not allow individuals to transact, and that was an Emergency Measures Act change, and it doesn't matter what colors in government now, that whatever that provision is in place now is for both colors or any colors, so it's not good. But when they froze the bank accounts, that was very devastating for me. Like to know that as an entrepreneur, I go out, I expend energy and output in hopes of getting a greater return in the future, a future that's not promised to me. And the fruits of my labor are stored in these units that are effectively on an on-off switch now. So to wrap up, I guess, freedom of speech, freedom of mobility, our freedoms, our charters, I really found that the freedom to transact was kind of a base layer to all of those freedoms. If you want to say things online, if you want to use your mobility, you need to transact, you need to transmit, you need to be able to exchange your medium. And if that's restricted, all of your other rights are restricted. So I don't really even know if I have a question, as much as that's kind of I framed from how I tried to attempt to stop government overreach. And I'm only putting those in quotes because I agree with you, but like whatever overreach is, Bitcoin was my initial answer. So I guess my question to you is, how do you look at Bitcoin in a sovereignty toolkit? Where is Bitcoin for you, and where are you on your Bitcoin journey, if you're open to sharing where you are on your Bitcoin journey?
Before we get to there's a couple of things mentioned that are worth exploring, because remember that the same government that froze contributor bank accounts to the 2022 Freedom Convoy were found to be unconstitutional. The Emergencies Act that they enabled that they used in order to freeze people's bank account has been found to be unconstitutional and illegal by the Supreme Court of Canada. Yet they faced no consequences whatsoever because they have Crown protection. This is the same government that is passing those bills, telling us to trust me, bro, we're doing it for the right reasons. So it's very important what you're saying, because it shows intent and shows the type of behavior that we have seen in Canada. And, people will argue, oh yeah, but those bank accounts were frozen for a few days and then they got their money back. Okay, sure. Awesome. That is called crushing dissent. The punishment is, the actual process becomes the punishment. Who wants to donate money to the Freedom Convoy if you have a risk of getting your account frozen? The same thing is going on right now. Who wants to speak against the government if you could potentially be arrested for hate speech? This is what, when Look at the UK. About 13,000 people a year are being arrested by police for social media posts. Do you think that does not give a damper to other people to say, hey, maybe I should watch what I say? And this is the whole point, right? When it comes to Bitcoin, you know, I used to be invested in Bitcoin. I used to be invested in crypto. But in all transparency, when I lost my career, I lost my house, I lost absolutely everything over the process of, you don't get to speak the way I do and get to be hired by a different company, considering that there's about 3 or 4 telecom companies in Canada. So I lost absolutely everything. I sold absolutely everything. But anybody that's seen what happened during the Freedom Convoy has to understand that your money is up for grabs. So whatever method that you decide to use to kind of shield yourself from government overreach should be explored, no matter if it is crypto, no matter if it's buying gold and silver bars and keeping them under your mattress, as crazy as this sounds. This is an opportunity that a lot of people are doing, but there is a need for currency that is not easily accessed by a government if you do believe in free speech, if you do believe in the government not having their hands in your pockets anytime they see fit.
I think, Nico, there will be, we're seeing kind of trends now, and in the Bitcoin space specifically, we're seeing a lot of people that are leaving Canada. There's news reports about, you know, the brain drain of young people leaving Canada because of, you know, inflation, the expensiveness, you know, those types of issues. I just saw an article from the UK. Actually, it was another Bitcoiner who posted it, Peter McCormack, who mentioned the UK is now seeing the lowest number of millionaires in, like, you know, in the last number of years. So I mean, obviously there's a capital flight there. We're seeing the rise of you know, in the Bitcoin space, there's like this the sovereign individual. There's, you know, a lot of, when we run our conference, there's a lot of companies that are coming up now about, called like Citizen X, or, you know, these companies who are providing passport facilities, currency facility, you know, like different citizenship fees and that sort of stuff. Do you think that trend's gonna continue to rise as these bills get implemented and start, and, you know, and news comes out about people, and again in the UK, same thing, you know, people being arrested for social media posts? Do you think people are going to go, right, we're just going to go to a country that respects our money, respects our freedom? You know, what's your thoughts on that?
Some of the numbers right now, you're looking at over 120,000 Canadian citizens and permanent residents left Canada in 2025. And those are all prime. We're not talking about boomers here. We're talking about prime worker between the age of 25 and 49, all of whom were highly skilled and high earners. So you're looking at the cream of the crop of Canadians that are leaving Canada in order to go somewhere where their governments is going to leave them alone. Because at the end of the day, at least I can only speak for myself. That's all I expect from my government, is to leave me alone. Fix the road, stop sending monies overseas, and take care of Canadians, and then leave me alone. That's all I want from my government. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending how you see it, people are starting to realize this, but they're not staying in Canada to fight the system. They're just simply, you know what, I don't have to deal with this. I'm going to do what's best for my family, and I'm going to simply leave to a country that will respect my rights, at least when it comes to money.
Yeah, and I mean, my background is engineering as well, and I see it in the engineering field. You see, over the last number of years, you know, projects, you can see substandard design, substandard, you know, implementation, you know, cost overruns, all these kind of, I see as a not a symptom, but the outcome of, you know, this path. You know what I mean?
But like, consider this for an example. As per Fraser Institute, the 2025 studies, 42.3% is what the average working Canadian pays in taxes, both municipal, provincial, and federal. Almost 50%. We're not talking about the highest earners here. We're talking the average working Canadian pays 42.3% in taxes. That is insane. That is, you have to work until, I think the number is June 9th. You need to work until June 9th in order to start making money, because all of that money goes to the government. Can you blame people from, forget the censorship, forget the surveillance? Do you blame people for wanting to leave because they want to keep money in their pockets? I don't.
Nico, so despite everything you've lost, you're still here fighting. What keeps you optimistic about Canada's future, and what does winning actually look like to you?
That is a tricky question, because I'm not optimistic about it at all, in the sense that you want to hear. It's going to get worse before it gets better. You know, there's the what's the term? There's the theory of turning, the 80-year to 100-year cycle, where it always goes worse. Like, you know, the old expression, a hard man creates good times create soft men create hard times create hard men. This is an 80 to 120-year cycle, and we are at the tail end of soft men create hard times. We're about, in my opinion, to enter hard times. But, you know, at the end of the day, you guys might not want to hear this, but I'm a Christian first and foremost, and I believe that we win at the end. So I'm always optimistic, because I have faith that there's something bigger, and this is all happening for a reason. My calling is to just inform. I share information, like it or not. It's a fact. It's research. What I talk about is not emotions. It's what's actually going on. Will it put me in trouble? Maybe. We'll see. Time will say. But I'm only optimistic because I know we win at the end. But I do have faith that people will wake up, because unlike popular belief, in order to change a country, you don't need 50% of people to wake up. The estimate is about 10. 10% of people is normally enough, if they're organized, in order to educate and change a country. So you don't need 90%. You need 10% to influence the other 90. And 10%, in my opinion, is manageable. But unfortunately, when I say that it's going to get worse before it gets better, is we didn't end up in the situation that we're in right now over the past year. This is something that has been going on for decades. Just like in all other countries in the West, it is something that's been being implemented slowly and slowly. So it's going to take time to backtrack it. You can educate all the Canadians you want. It's going to take time to change what's happening. But at the end of the day, I have faith, man. My faith keeps me optimistic.
Yeah, and one last one, Dan, maybe before, I know we're near the end here. Is that okay, or Dan, do you want to finish it up?
Yeah, no, better way.
So Nico, you mentioned you're Christian first, and that you believe that we win in the end, right? So do you see a connection between your faith and what Bitcoin stands for? Truth, honest money, freedom from corrupt systems. Like, how do Jesus and Bitcoin fit together in your worldview?
That is a very interesting question. I don't think I've ever been asked that question. I've never been asked that question. I definitely never pondered that question. But anything that keeps you free, because at the end of the day, it's a choice, right? Christianity, my belief, is a choice. You choose to believe or you don't. I want to be in a country that allows people to have the choice. In no way, shape, or form do I believe that everybody should be forced to be Christian, because that goes against what Christianity is all about. But I do believe that Bitcoin is a tool that could potentially be used for people to be free. And that is, at the end of the day, all that matters to me, is the individuals should be responsible for their livelihood. Because one thing that we tend to forget, and it's not just Canadians, is citizens as a whole, governments work for us. We don't work for them. They are our employees. They're not the ones that should be spying on us. We should be spying on them. I come from the corporate world, and guess what? My employers had access to my phone logs because it was their phone. I was on their time. They had access to my emails. They could track what I was doing to see if I was performing. And that's an understanding that you take when you work for somebody else's corporation. But we should have the same power when it comes to our government. Those cameras that they spy on us with, all those bills should be applied to them so that we can see what they do, who they talk to, what do they say behind closed doors, who do they interact with. This is the thing that Canadians, all world citizens, should remember, that they work for us. It's never a good country when the people are scared of the government. It's always a good country when the government is scared of its people.
Amen.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point you said, Nico, about getting worse before it gets better, and I agree. I think that's a lot of the Bitcoiners' sentiment too. And again, it's a phrase that comes up a lot in Bitcoin circles, is hard times make was it soft men make hard times make strong men. So it's certainly that. But in the financial world, I listen to some podcasts and some commentators, and the theme that seems to keep coming up, and maybe this is kind of all related around that path of getting worse before it gets better, is government debt and government bloated government employees. And I think I've mentioned a few times where the Canadian government, and I was just going to look up the stat there, but they've added quite a lot of more people in the last number of years. And I mean, it seems silly, like, when you're looking at competition and this global competition for resources and people and and intelligence almost. The Canadian government and the other governments too, they keep getting in the way. These bills are just signals to me that they just want to get in the way, and they need people to get in the way, and they keep growing their user base. But I think what's your thoughts around how the system changes? I mean, for me, I think it's government collapse. I think if there's a government collapse, then you'll have the natural order maybe will resume, where we go to what's best and what drives that. So what's your thoughts around that?
Well, I'm going to start by saying that, just to give you some numbers, I just wanted to make sure that I was accurate, but right now in Canada, 21.8% of Canadian workers work for the government, either municipal, provincial, or federal. And to put it into perspective, those people do not generate money. Their salaries are 100% paid through tax. So 80% of Canadians support 20% of workers. And I've done the calculation myself, because those calculations do not exist out there. But I calculated that the average government worker costs Canadian about 140 grand a year. When you calculate salaries, benefits, pension, everything together. Yet the average salary in Canada is around 65 to 70,000. So let's call it 70,000 for sake of argument. So the average government worker costs twice the average salary in Canada, yet it is paid 100% through taxes. And you are absolutely right. Federal workers, public sector is the only sector that keeps growing in Canada. Yet private sector and small businesses keeps being decimated, while the government force keeps on getting bloated and more bloated and more bloated. And I can say that with an absolute fact. I am the only guy in my family that does not work or has never worked for the government. All of my family are government workers, and I can tell you that they're getting paid a lot for doing not much. They would never make the salaries that they make in the private sector. So, a lot of people don't understand that in the private sector, you have a chance of making more money than you do in the government. So if you're that 5% of top performers, you can make a lot more money than you would do in the public sector. That's why most of the guys leave the public sector after a career and they start working for the private sector, and they literally quadruple their salary overnight. But if you're just an average worker, you will make a lot more money in the government, probably twice as much as you would in the private sector. But it is, what was your question again? I completely forgot your question. My apologies, because I was just putting I'm a numbers guy, so I put numbers to what you were saying, but I forgot your question.
Well, yeah, the question was related to, that end result where, the government collapse could be where the hard times end and the good times come again. And just on the points, I was just looking it up. I think that the government workforce in Canada has grown about 22 or 28%, I think, from 2019 to 2024. And the peak, it's gone down now. But yeah, sorry. So that's it. Do you think that's the end of that cycle ends with government debt collapse, layoffs, and then governments start to get out of the way?
Well, it depends, man. The thing is that we live at a very interesting time where technology is making people irrelevant. And this is a place, and we've never seen it to the scale. Obviously, every time there's new technology, it replaces the workforce, then the workforce adapts, and then the cycle continues. But I don't think we've ever seen in human history a single thing as in AI that could replace so much of the workforce, but not only replace the workforce, but surveillance and censor people at the same time. Because obviously there's been censorship government throughout history, but never to a point where they had the technology to apply it to the extent that we're starting to see right now. So to me, I don't know if the government collapse is even possible, in a sense that, look at Canada, for example. We have the third largest oil reserve in the world. We have one of the places that have the most precious minerals in the world. We have some of the biggest forests in the world. We should literally be as rich as Saudi Arabia. Like, I'm just giving you an example. We have the potential of being arguably top 5, if not top 3. There's no way to calculate it properly, but there's no way we should be in a recession right now, the only country in the G7. So what we're seeing is 100% government policies that have kept our natural resources in the ground. This is a fact. It's not Donald Trump to the south that's hurting our economy. It is us that have destroyed it over decades of policies. So we're sitting on some of the biggest natural resources in the world, yet we're in a recession. I don't believe our government is stupid. Unlike a lot of people out there, I don't tend to underestimate people. I tend to give credit where credit is due, even though that I don't agree with it and I think it's evil. But this is what we call managed collapse. What we're seeing right now is done on purpose in order to buy resources for pennies on the dollar. How's the best way to buy a company? You try to lower the value of the company before you buy it. And that's exactly what's going on in Canada right now. We have all the tools in the world to be one of the richest country, yet we choose not to. And I don't believe it's stupidity. It's managed collapse. They're doing it on purpose in order to be able to grasp or to obtain all that natural resources for pennies on the dollar. And you need to see it from a perspective of a one world government. And this is not even conspiracy theories. How many times have Mark Carney, even in his speech in Davos at the WEF, he has mentioned that the old order is dying and a new world order will need to emerge from this. Read his book, Values. He tells you exactly what his plan is. He's not hiding it. We're seeing it right now, and it's managed decline. Merci, Charlottetown. It's managed decline. I love comment. I have some very smart commenters. So Charlotte is awesome. Thank you. But that is exactly what it means. That's what's happening in Canada.
So just before maybe Ben or Sonny jump in, but funny when you say that, the managed decline, because I was kind of thinking you're giving government almost too much credit. I think it's more incompetence and short-term thinking. But then when you started to say about managed decline, I was thinking back about when I was much younger and around the time of the financial collapse in 2008. If you remember, Greece took a bailout and Spain took a bailout, and Ireland, my country, took a bailout. But I remember because at that time I was listening to Max Kaiser, who was a Bitcoiner, and definitely on that spectrum of freedom and anti-government. But he was following the Greece story, and I was following very, very closely, and I thought, okay, this is it. They're gonna let Greece collapse. They're going to they're gonna start over again. There's people there that'll help do this, and they kicked the can down the road. They took the bailout, and then when you read into the story later, in a lot of those countries post 2008, the WEF, or I can't remember if it was Davos or the guys who were in Brussels at the time. It was all ex-Goldman Sachs, and they just went in and they said, okay, we'll give you this bailout, but you're going to give us all your ports, all your airports, all your tolls, all your toll roads. We're going to put toll roads in, and we're going to do that, do this. And they did it the whole way across Europe. And now when you go across Europe, that's all you have is tolls. Everything's expensive in airports, bridges, tolls, And so do you think that's where Canada's going? I mean, it's probably already halfway there, but is that the next phase?
You're referring to the IMF. You're referring
to the IMF.
The International Monetary Fund is what you're referring to. Yes, that's 100% the plan. 100%. Because don't forget who Mark Carney actually is. Mark Carney sat on the board of trustee of the WEF. He is not just somebody behind the shadows here. He was one of the prominent figures, and he sat on the board of trustees of the WEF when they presented their 2050 net zero agenda. So we're talking about a man that was part of putting it together. If he was on the board of trustees, it's safe to assume that he knew all about this when it was presented to their members. So yes, that's the plan. You demolish a country from within in order for it to become a slave to a one world government. And think about it this way, because this sounds like conspiracy theories to a lot of people, but imagine that your plan is a one world government and you have a country like Canada with some of the biggest natural resources in the world. If you start treating the world as one place, wouldn't you want a country like Canada with all the natural resources almost available right there, untouched? Of course you would. That's just plain business at this point. So is it that far-fetched to believe that managed decline is happening right now in Canada when we have a so-called international banker that was sent here to save us? Not that hard to believe, if you ask me. If you don't see a connection, it's because you're blind or you're willfully ignorant.
Just one more point before I hand it over to Ben and Sonny, but I'm just checking to see what the relationship between the government employees in Greece were and what they're, because I think it was around like 40% or something, and Canada's kind of getting up there. But I think, it was roughly at the time of the bailout 20 to 22%. So I mean, that was one of the reasons why they, from what I remember, that was one of the reasons why they said they were going to bail them out, because there was too many employees in government, not enough private. Sorry, go ahead, Ben or Sonny.
Well, I'll just a closing point to kind of bring it back to kind of Bitcoin and everything we talked about. In terms of Sonny asked a great question about the book or Jesus and Bitcoin, and there's a great book, Thank God for Bitcoin, and there's actually there's a few works of books that are written about this topic, but I would highly recommend they follow along the different times that sound money and hard money is discussed in the Bible, having equal measures and fair scales and all that. That's something that is quite prevalent. Something that Bitcoin is kind of the whole antithesis. That's the whole basis of Bitcoin is it's open and fair. And so with Bitcoin, often people think of the number go up, the asset, but I always kind of bring it back to the base layer, the network itself. It's open, permissionless, global, decentral, peer-to-peer. So this is a civil liberties technology kind of go up. You know, we often say number go up, but this is freedom go up. And so I'd highly encourage to
And then most importantly, censorship resistant.
correct.
Bitcoin is inherently censorship resistant, right? So it is highly subversive. There's a reason that the people who supposedly control the world don't like Bitcoin, and that they, you know, are trying to work against it. And those who, you know, like free and public systems and private markets embrace it. So there is some connection there. But yeah, but Dan, we're over time by 15 minutes. I want to be respectful of Nico's schedule. Nico, you're definitely a warrior, and I think we're all kind of fighting the same type of war, maybe different battles or whatever. But yeah, glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I wasn't thinking
pleasure.
I'd go down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories, but I'm always happy to.
Here we are.
Recommendations, by the way, Ben, great recommendation. And I just noticed your name, not Ben Mulroney. Oh, that's funny. I just noticed. That's funny.
So just to land the plane, Nico, where can people find you on social media?
At real Nico Lagan. I'm on literally 7, 8, or 9 different social media. I'm all over the place. So
perfect. And then on our side,
I run a show called The Political Orphans, where I actually do deep dives on these type of topics 3 times a week. So Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. And I take a lot of comments. As you can see right now, it's not even my hour for my show, and people are just commenting. That's the type of, I'm blessed. This is the type of following that I have. I take 30 minutes of comments on every show. So if people want to discuss the topic, I was breaking down cars yesterday. Like, can Ford turn off your car? And I did the whole deep dive on, is it possible or not? So if guys want to be informed about what's going on, but really have a conversation, more of a community aspect to what's happening, at Real Nico Lagan, find me on YouTube, The Political Orphans, 3 times a week. I will be happy to talk to you guys.
Perfect. Well, I think there'll be lots of Bitcoiners that will can relate with what you're doing, what you're discussing over there. So yeah, really appreciate it. On our side, Canadian Bitcoin Conference, we have an event coming up in October 1st and 2nd. So yeah, hit up our socials, our website, get your tickets, come along, meet other Bitcoiners. If you're just interested in Bitcoin, come along as well. There'll be something for you. So thank you very much, Nico. Have a good day.
Same to you guys.
Perfect.